Welcome to another episode of VP's Guest List. I'm your host, VP, and the guest stopping by today for a conversation is a software engineer in big tech. He is arguably my most ambitious friend, and he's the person or friend who always laughs at the most inopportune time. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Micah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me,
Yeah,
Victor.
yeah,
Thanks for having
yeah.
me, VP, I should say.
Yeah, VP. VP is the name we're going by. But how you doing, man? How you doing? How's work? How's everything? How's life?
Yeah, everything is going pretty well. I think, I'm at a time where I'm able to learn a lot. And so I just want to dig into that, as much as possible. So, just paying off my learning debt as soon as possible. But beyond that, things are going fine. Enjoying the
Mhm.
California weather, although it gets cold sometimes, but generally it's pretty
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. No, yeah. No, that's great. No, that's the interesting thing you said about like learning that we're gonna dig into that a little bit deeper. But just to start off, you're a software engineer in big tech. One, just wanted to talk about your background, right? How did you get here? What did you study in college? If you even went to college, just talk to me about your skill set and how you pretty much got to where you are and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so I think I took the normal route, the traditional route for becoming a software engineer. Although at this point, it's hard to argue that that's a traditional route for becoming a software engineer. I did study computer science in college. I went to Tufts University. Just graduated like a year ago or so, and got a job in big tech. So when it comes to building my skills, I mostly, it's kind of tricky. A friend was asking me a couple days ago, like, "Hey, Micah,
Mhm.
he's about to graduate and he's gonna work in Microsoft." And he's like, do I need, and he studied computer engineering. So he's like, hey, Micah, um, did you use anything from college in the job you're doing now? Because he's scared, like, the computer science majors might have like a leg up over him. And I'm like, it's kind of tricky because there are some fundamental things that you learn in college, including how to think about computers and learning things on a very, very base level, fundamental level. That would absolutely be important in the job, but not in a direct way. Right. And there's these other things that might be important in the job because like you have to learn the tech stack, you have to learn how things work over there, the company you're going to work in. And those things that might be directly important, you're most likely not going to be doing that in school. And so you'd have to learn on the job mostly. So when it comes to building my skills, I did, pick a few things up from school, but nothing too consequential to the job I'm doing now.
Okay, okay. So that's an interesting take actually. So you're saying that if I heard you correctly, just you were able to learn obviously, how to think about computers, et cetera, in school, but you know, although that's helpful, that's not the bulk of what you need to know to be able to be successful on the job, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. Most of the time, you're probably going to be learning on the job. I know a lot of people who, more coworkers who are like senior engineers and staff engineers who like were boot camp grads. I think the advantage for having like being a software engineer like from college is that, you most likely had to finish some assignments. You most likely had to do things under pressure. So you're kind of like, you're already like built for that in a way, although it's like a whole different ballgame in big tech.
Yeah.
But it kind of helps you to be able to deliver on time. You kind of know that, okay, these are things I need to look out for. But generally, when you go on the job, you're probably going to have to learn a lot because, you have to learn how to be a good software engineer. And that's not something that's really taught in school. You're just taught how to be a good student.
Right. Right. No, yeah, I agree. I mean, yes, I think even, I studied biochemistry in college and yes, it's definitely completely different from what you do. I don't work in, sciences now, but like even I work in finance and even I took like few econ classes and, one finance class and you
Yeah.
learn something completely different. Like for example, a DCF model, which is something that's like, you're pretty much discounting future cash flows and, bringing it to net present value. That's something that's, drilled into your brain in college, but then once you come in a job, everyone is like, no one cares about this. So it's very like interesting how that plays out. So I'm sure, you guys have something like that
Yeah.
as well in software engineering.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah, but I guess, one, two, just going back a little bit, what initially got you to pursue, this as a career path, right? People
Yeah.
always have sometimes whether it's, you know, you saw a software engineer when you were a kid and you're like, this is it. I'm locked in. I'm going for this no matter what. Or was it just, college and you just stumbled upon it?
Yeah, that's actually interesting. So I went to high school in Ghana and I went to Presec, you know, called Prosec League on, senior high school. And when
Oh,
I was in high school, initially I got into that school as a science major, as a general science major. So as a
uh-huh.
general science major, you have to do like the traditional, main sciences. That's, physics, chemistry, biology, and you do some elective math as well. But when I
Oh,
got on that day, they had, Presec was one of the few schools in Ghana that offered an elective ICT course. So ICT is Information and Communications Technology. And you could sort of like drill down into that for, as a high school student. That wasn't offered in many schools at the time. Um, so that was, I was like, huh, I kind of like computers. I like playing games. I used to play games a lot. Although I stopped, when I got into high
yeah.
school, I used to play
I
games a
remember
lot.
those days. Yeah.
Yeah, you used to beat
Yeah.
me in FIFA a lot, but
A
I
lot,
think
a lot.
now you're definitely not as good.
Yeah, I haven't played in a long time, so I'm probably not. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I used to play games a lot, and watch a lot of movies in computer science. Not really computer. I didn't know what it was. I just knew ICT, and I was pretty good with ICT when I was in, junior high school. So I was playing around with computers a lot, taking things apart. And, that's like everyone's story, but I really was taking things apart, destroying a lot of computers. Um, but that wasn't really, I don't think that really translated a lot into doing computer science or software engineering. If anything, could have been like a computer engineer or maybe an electrical engineer. But I think when I got into high school, I met some of the guys and they're like programming. They were like programming coding. I'd never heard of that before. And so I joined some kind of club. It was a robotics club. And, we're playing with the EV3s and the Lego robots. And, that's kind of like those small robots that we use for competitions. And it was mostly like a fusion of hardware and software. Right. So I was like, huh, there's something I don't know about computers. I thought I knew a lot of things about computers. And those were times when I could go into like, the Windows, the OS stuff, I was really learning command prompts, learning the command line and stuff like that. Although those were not that important, it was just cool to know. But I saw these dudes who were like programming, they can write apps, they can write code and stuff like I had no clue. So one time, one of the guys, one of the leaders, the executives of the robotics club, is like, yeah, he's gonna teach us Python, right? And I was like, okay, Python. So he's like, I asked one of the guys, there were some two guys who were in the club and they were in my house and class who were really, really smart. They had been programming for like, I think since junior high school, even in like their grade school.
Oh
So they
wow.
knew a lot about coding. And I was like, how do I even get started on this thing? And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you can open like a processor, a word, it wasn't a word processor, but you can open like Notepad or something and just say, you can just type in commands like if X print Y. I was like, okay, cool. So I went home, opened Notepad, and then typed print if X equals 10. It was equal, not like the double equal thing. If X equal 10, print X. And I saved that and I run it and nothing happened, right? I knew nothing about coding. So I was like, huh, these guys are really smart and I have no clue. So that's when I began to dig into, tutorials for Python and I began to learn data structures and algorithms and HackerRank and, begin to read books. That was like within like the sophomore year or like the second year of high school. And that's how I got into coding and stuff like that. So I could say like when it comes to college, I could say like I'm grateful that I kind of had like an idea. I think a lot of people go into college and come out of college without really an idea of, what they want to do after college. I think I went into college kind of knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and I'm super grateful for that. But, it's all just like circumstance and thing is, I never liked biology because it was, I wasn't going to use the legs of an ant for anything. Learning, the digestive system of a fowl, I'm not
Come
going to
on,
use that
man.
for anything. I'm sure people, I want my doctors to know about the legs of an antelope. I want them to know, but personally, I wasn't interested in that. So I think, I
Yeah.
was just like in the right place at the right time to, dig into an elective ICT and that translated into a whole lot.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's the comment on the biology definitely is funny because, I took biochemistry, which is essentially just a mix of biology and chemistry. And, one of the recurring theme was that biology is not a real science. The real
Oh,
science
really?
is physics. Like when you talk to, at least that was the theme within my undergrad, where people were
Yeah.
just like, physics and chemistry are like the true sciences. Biology is
Yeah.
just people just being curious about,
Yeah.
like you said,
Interesting.
how many legs does s- you know, antelope has or something, like, what's the
Yeah.
digestive tract of,
Yeah.
a fowl? Like it's just like, all right. I'm never gonna use this in my life ever again.
Yeah, true, true. I think
But
when I was reading about Einstein, I
mhm,
was reading his book, his biography from, I forget his name, this popular Isaac, Walter Isaacson. He wrote about Einstein, and I was reading that, Einstein kind of did not like any field of science apart from physics. Like that was his go-to. And then that translated into him knowing that, okay, he kind of needs math to do physics, and that's how,
exactly,
Einstein was, doing his stuff. Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, I mean that's a bit of a. I'm about to go a little bit on a tangent here, but I do agree. I think math, physics, like if I had to go back to college, I think what I would study, I would do a double major in computer science and mathematics and sort
Interesting.
of tie in, maybe like a physics minor or something like that.
Yeah.
Just because that's why I see the most value in understanding how things work and just being able to really build things as opposed to what I studied. But, that's just me.
Yeah.
But yeah. But no, going back to, your background. So I definitely like what you talked about when you talked about, building things, etc. I think for many people, that's usually their gateway to it. And, I definitely commend you for, being open to, right, to learning something new and, being curious as well. Because, I know for me, like I said, I studied biochemistry, but then transitioned to finance. And it was a similar story, right? I just got into the
Yeah.
stock market, started trading, got into foreign exchange trading, so trading currencies. And then just being curious and just digging deeper, how can I be better here?
Yeah.
And obviously it has suited you well, given that you're in big tech. So I'm sure you're doing something right now, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I guess talking about the software engineering field, right? I think there's a lot of misconception or people just don't know what it is to actually be a software engineer, right? Can you, obviously don't give any proprietary information or anything like that, but can you give us some insight into what a typical day or a typical week looks like for you at Big Tech? What are you guys working on? What projects are you, excited about? Essentially, how is it like working in Big Tech?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's definitely a good one. I think, it really varies depending on your level as an engineer, right? So
Uh-huh.
in most big tech companies, and I can only speak for like the company I'm working in, Meta, but it sort of like translates into many other companies, right?
Uh-huh.
But in most big tech companies, there are different levels for engineers. And I think it's usually big tech that offers like a dedicated engineering route and then a managerial route, right? And in many
Okay.
companies, as you grow higher and higher as an engineer, you be transitioned to a manager. But
All right.
for big tech, you can go from, a junior engineer to like all the way up to like a distinguished engineer. And that's like the highest level, I think, of Meta. And it's the highest level at many other companies, right? And you don't need to be convert over to become a manager. So day in life in
Oh,
big
wow.
tech is going to vary depending on whether you're a manager. I mean, whether you're an individual contributor, that's what we call like the people who are not managers and they're just engineers. So whether you're an engineer or you're a manager, it's going to vary a lot. I think for managers, you're most likely going to be in a lot of meetings. You just hop from one meeting to another, and you'd be involved in a lot of road mapping and planning, and just like general management of. And I mean, there are different kinds of managers. The software engineering managers would be like in charge of like software engineering teams, usually between like 6 to 12 members in the team. They're responsible for hiring and staffing up the team and meeting the deadlines and stuff like that, getting their team to work. And they're like higher level managers that are responsible for other managers, they're directors and stuff like that. And there's like the IC route, which is the individual contributor route. And that's where like it's solely filled by engineers, right? So, well, mostly engineers. As an IC, you can be like a different kind of IC, but when it comes to ICS engineers, there are different levels to it. And, in Meta, we start from like the IC3, that's a junior developer. You go to IC4, mid-level developer. Go to IC5, that's a senior engineer. Many companies would want all your employees to get to there's like some kind of like timeline for promotion. So you kind of like need to get to an IC5 to become a senior engineer within a specific time.
Okay.
Otherwise,
And
you would
and
be
what's that
able to.
time frame?
From Meta, I think it's like, it depends. So if you're an IC3 to IC4, you usually have like 2 years together, like 24 months. And if you're an IC4, you need to get to an IC5 in like 33 months. So somewhere around like 3 years. Otherwise, you'd be put on a PIP and then you'd be fired, most likely. Um, I know that's similar for many other companies and even in other industries. But when you get to an IC5, you're allowed to be there for as long as you want. So people like to stay at IC5 level for many, many years. And, you don't get that much responsibility, but you get to contribute a lot. Your pay still goes up, but you don't necessarily need to, meet so many other different requirements. I know that was a long-winded way of saying that, a day in life of an IC or an engineer myself, is different. But generally for engineers, it's mostly like if you're an IC engineer, you're mostly coding. The higher you go, the more involved you be in many other meetings. So take like an IC6, which would be like a staff. I don't know if that would be a staff engineer or like a senior to say engineer, right? But in that position, you're most likely, coming up with you're helping with the road mapping for the team. You're most likely coming up with, specking out, how something should be built, putting in the architecture, talking to many other teams in different parts of the company to make sure that things are done, working on privacy, working on different other things. But the lower you go, the more coding tasks you would have to be doing, right? So for threes and fours, you're most likely implementing features, you're most likely coding. You do attend a lot of meetings depending on the project you're working on, but like, most of the time you're coding. So I go to the office in the morning, come back in the evening. Most of the time I spend coding. And in most cases, in many companies, like it's really about your output. So it doesn't really matter if you go to the office and you just chill the whole day. It's really about how much output you give out, right? But it's very unlikely that you go to the office and you chill the whole day because it correlates, the amount of time you spend working correlates with the output you get. There's like a positive correlation, with that. So it's mostly like go to the office, and Meta, thankfully, they give us like free food in breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And dinner is like at 6 p.m.
That's nice,
So,
man.
so if you want to stay, work ends at 5. If you want to stay for dinner, you have to stay an extra hour so you can get a dinner. But it's mostly just coding, meetings, and just implementing stuff, hanging out with friends, at the office. It's just like a college campus, you would say, where the classes you're taking is actually the code, the projects you're working on. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, I mean, listen, the food will definitely get me there longer. Maybe I'm drinking the
yeah,
Kool-Aid a little bit, but I definitely think, food, especially now in this current economy, I think, definitely goes a long way, not at least
yeah,
not having to put in extra time to cook, etc. But I just want to go to back to what you said about, so there are two main pathways, right? You have the sort of ICP and then you have managerial route. You
yeah.
know, I guess you did indicate that, the ICP, you're still sort of not having to manage people, you're not hiring, etc. But I guess why would someone choose the managerial role over the ICP or vice versa? Is there like higher comp somewhere? Do they feel like it's, actually driving the company's direction or like, just talk to me about the, what you've seen or, what you personally think about sort of picking either option.
Yeah, so at work, I like to talk to a lot of people, managers, engineers, just to get, their take on stuff. So happy to speak to a lot of, managers as well to figure out why they chose to be managers. And the thing is, most managers converted from engineers to managers. There's like, for Meta, there's like IC3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you can only convert from an engineer to like an IC to a manager when you're level 6, right? And when you're at level 6, you'll most likely be doing a lot of tech leading. You'll be doing a lot like, leading entire sub teams. So like for instance, I'm in the AI team, the Meta AI team on WhatsApp. And in that team, we have like a couple IC6s over there, and we have some sevens as well. And what's the IC6s are in charge of like an entire pillar that, they're not in charge of managing that pillar. They're in charge of like the technical side of that pillar, right? So when it comes to like thinking about the technical side of the different projects you have to implement, looking at how do we build this thing from scratch, which is what many of the IC6s do. Thinking about how to break these projects into smaller pieces, and that would trickle down to the the bottom engineers. I wouldn't want to call them bottom engineers, but like the most junior developers to sort of like implement the the minor tasks and stuff like that and bring it all together. But I think many people choose the managerial route because maybe they're tired of coding for a while. Like if you're an IC6, you've probably been in the role for like maybe 10 years. Um,
Mhm.
you know, at least 10 years or 7 to 10 years, I'd say. And that is a lot of coding. So I was speaking to one of the IC6s and he's like, yeah, it gets repetitive because it's like the same thing over and over again. So sometimes people would switch teams, so they learn something else. Other times people would just convert over to becoming managers. And as a manager, you're not expected to code at all. So I think that's the thing. You just attend a lot of meetings and, but it's a lot more work because managers rarely have time. They're
Mhm.
really in charge of a lot of things, one-on-ones and stuff like that. So I think that's really the main thing. People they just want like a different experience.
Different experience. No, yeah, I mean, wow, that's yeah, I mean that's good insight because, you know, from someone being outside of big tech, I definitely thought everyone there is coding or doing something because at least in finance, right? Like you still have like I have portfolio managers and traders and stuff, and I'm the research analyst, so I'm more so doing the digging into specific companies and seeing which one we should buy, and
Yeah.
traders are executing those trades, and then PMs are really just managing the portfolio. But
Hmm.
I would say still like PMs do cover certain names and are able to at least like know what's going on with each individual name that we own. So I
Yeah.
think it's a very different sort
Yeah.
of way where,
Yeah.
as a manager, you could be very removed from code, I
Yeah,
guess.
I mean, like because most of the managers were initially engineers, they kind of like understand the technical side a lot, and even to a deeper level than some of the engineers. But most of
Oh,
their day
wow.
to day, it's really just meetings. It's a lot of meetings. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't think I could stay in that many meetings in a day. Yeah, they just have a lot. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I can agree. I think some meetings are definitely like could or can be an email or like,
yeah,
can be short, but I think sometimes people just like to have a floor and talk, which
yeah,
which is fine. But I think when you have, other, commitments or responsibilities, it can feel annoying. So I
yeah,
totally understand that sentiment.
yeah.
Yeah, but pivoting, into that. So you talked about, going to work, being there till let's say 6 to get dinner, etc. Can you just talk about, work-life balance, right? How is work-life
Damn.
balance in big tech?
Hey,
Or,
that's a
do
good
you even
one.
care about work-life balance? Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
I'd be a good representative of, how people treat their big tech jobs. First off, because it's like my first job out of college and it's in big tech.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think, I'm representative of how people treat their jobs. So whatever I'm gonna say, you better take it with like a barrel of salt. Um,
Okay.
Personally, I do not care so much about work-life balance at this point in time. I understand why many engineers would care about work-life balance. We're told a story of, how sometimes, in big tech, I would say it depends on the company you're working with. Meta is a company that generally like moves very fast. So it's like one of the sort of like a startup company in like a big tech, swimming pool, right? And we move very fast. So sometimes you have to push beyond, your 9 to 5, right, to get some stuff done, right? But that's probably for my team. My team is like the AI team, and AI is like new technology. We're trying to, capitalize on, capture the market for AI. And so we
Yeah.
kind of have to do a lot more work.
Yeah.
But many other teams is more chill. But you heard about the recent round of layoffs, mass layoffs from Meta, where it was like a performance-based layoff. It's like, well, if you didn't produce something, then you're gonna get cut, right? So it means that it sort of like it rises up the ante, it raises up the ante for people to want to, not care so much about work-life balance. But at the same time, there's so many opportunities to, be, concerned about work-life balance. I think you can get a lot done if you focus on your work within the 9 to 5, right? You can get a lot of work done. I think that's the thing people don't understand. That it's like, your work doesn't have to consume you all the time. But personally, I do not care about work-life balance because I want to pay that learning debt. I'm now starting out my career. I think, there's a point where I need to learn a lot because I'm coming in as the most unskilled person of my team, I would say. And so I need to sort of like put in extra effort, I would say, in order to catch up to the rest of the team. And, most of the engineers would be like, no pressure, take some time off. And I do take some time off, maybe like a few times, maybe 1 or 2 times a year. But like most of the engineers, there's so many benefits that come with being in big tech. Like you can use some of the benefits to get like a free pass to a ski resort. You can use some of the benefits to get
Oh,
like healthcare. You can use that for a lot of different things, a
yeah.
massage, therapy, all that kind of good stuff. So many people do take advantage of that. Right.
Yeah.
And so like when it comes to work-life balance, I think the companies kind of know that, the job being an engineer or being an employee in big tech is pretty stressful. So they do put a few perks here and there to make sure that engineers sort of like take advantage of these perks to have like a more rounded, better work-life balance. And many managers would also encourage their engineers to sort of like, hey, you've been working hard for so long. Do you take some time off? Like, we have like accrued PTO, pay time off. And that, accrues up to like 30 days or 31 days per year. So if your manager can be like, hey, you're hitting your 31-day mark, you've not taken time off. So it means that, you've not taken time off that it's accrued to 31 days, and that's the max you can get. 30 days or 31
Right.
days, I forget. That's the max you can get. So the managers are going like, hey, take some time off, take a couple days off. And aside that, you have like choice days, you have like sick days, there's so many things to make it easier for engineers. But definitely you just know that you need to do your job, and that's really what matters.
Yeah. No, yeah, I totally agree, especially your point about the learning debt. I think for me, it's a hard pill to swallow, but I definitely think you need to put at the time.
Yeah.
Especially, when you're competing with individuals who've been doing this for at least, 7 to like 20 years,
Yeah.
right? You need
Insane.
to make sure that like you actually have a very fundamental, rudimentary understanding of what's going on and you understand how to implement whatever is being asked of you. And I think like for a lot of people, especially our generation, yes, I do see the TikToks or Instagram reels where, people are like, I worked for 9 a.m. to like 12, went to a spa date or whatever. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's cool. I think, yeah, to each his own and, pick whatever works for you. But I think for me, I don't think I've actually ever even worked 8 hours. I feel like minimum I've ever worked is like 10 hours. Like on average, I work 10 hours
Yeah,
days.
I think
Like
that's pretty
it's
different from finance.
yeah,
Engineers like it's because like we're mostly focused on, and there's like a very measurable output on a day-to-day basis, right?
right.
So, sometimes it's not that measured, because if it's like more like planning, project planning, it's not that measured. But
Hmm.
for engineers, you can measure the lines of code engineers contributed, how many code changes
Right.
they've pushed out, all that kind
Oh
of good
wow.
stuff.
Yeah.
So it's easy to know like the efficiency or the effectiveness of an engineer, especially at Meta,
Right.
I would say, and many big tech companies, you can measure that. So you can also tell whether you're making progress or not. Usually, they're not always deadlines, but usually there's some unspoken deadlines. It's like, hey, we want to ship this feature out,
Mhm.
within the next 2 months. So whatever you're going to do to make sure that this gets done within the next 2 months, you have to do it. So if you want to take the weekends to do that, that's fine. If you want to just take like 2 hours a day to do that, that's fine. But usually the projects are given out with a timeline, knowing that it's not going to take you 2 hours per day to do it. It's going to take you a little bit more than 5 hours, to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, that's fair. That's very good insight and helpful for all the listeners. You touched on you being on the AI team and AI is topical now. I think, even in finance, like we're having conversations about how we can, make our processes more efficient with AI, just generally speaking, what is your view on AI and also how do you see it impacting the software engineering field, 10, 15 years from now?
That's a good one. Like it's one of these technologies that is hard to predict where it's gonna go. Um, it could also be like a bubble we're in, but companies are investing a lot in AI at this point in time, and
Yeah.
that's why I have my job in the first place because I'm working on AI.
Yeah.
Just
Hey,
to go
good thing.
back,
Good thing for you.
yeah. So just to go back to college, so I did, research
Yeah.
for like maybe 2 years in college. I was mostly like AI research, reinforcement learning research. And that was like, that was before ChatGPT ever came out. I think ChatGPT came out when I was in like my junior year of college. I think it was like that fall of the junior year in December. That's when ChatGPT was
Yeah.
announced. And that thing was smart, but it was super dumb. Like, and that was like in 2020, I'd say 2023. Was it
Mhm.
2023 or 2022? I think it was 2022, right?
Yeah. End of 22. Yeah.
End of
Okay.
2022. So that thing
Yeah.
was smart because it was like something that the world had never seen before. But at the same time, I just to go back, I have this story where I tried to use it for cheating my way into big tech. I have a story for that, but try to use it for my online assessments and for my interviews and stuff like that, and nothing worked. And that's why I was like, "Yo, Micah, you gotta pin your ass down and actually learn how to pass the interviews and learn like data structures and algorithms from scratch and learn all these kind of things." Because like I was like this tool should be able to help me out, but it was done. It was getting all the answers wrong. And I think the annoying part was that it was so confident in the answers it was given, the hallucination thing. It's like
I
it's
agree.
never gonna admit that
Yeah.
it's wrong, except, it's
Yes.
never gonna let you know that, hey, I think I could be wrong here. Only when you point it out, it's like, hey, I think you're wrong. It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'm wrong. And then it's gonna give you an answer again and give you the same wrong answer or a different wrong
Yes.
answer
The
that
same
seems
similar. I agree. I agree.
yeah. Yeah. So AI definitely I think is a disruptor, I would say, in the field. Um, we've had like many of these CEOs in the past couple months or even last year talk about how AI is going to replace engineers and replace like mid-level to, junior to mid-level engineers. I do think that is a huge possibility. We do work with AI tools, on the job. So we have like AI assistants working on the job. I think, it's only a matter of time before they become smart enough to have context. At the same time, there are some levels of engineering that I think is going to be hard for AI to take advantage of, because like most of these levels of engineering require knowledge and context from other fields, other industries that, if you're just a technical person, you're probably never going to know about that, right? So when it
Can you
comes
give
to
some
privacy,
examples?
yeah, so when it comes to privacy, so I work on WhatsApp AI team, and we're
Mhm.
very, very big on privacy. Like we don't, I keep telling people they never believe me, but we can never read the messages people send on WhatsApp, right? It's
Okay.
not possible. We cannot read that message people send on WhatsApp.
There's no, proverbial backdoor anyhow.
That
Like,
backdoor does not exist. At
okay.
least maybe that's where my pay grade gets me to. That's that's where my pay gets me to.
Okay.
But I've seen the code that we write for WhatsApp, and there's no part of the code that allows us to read, what happens, when someone sends a text in an individual message. Sometimes it's so annoying that, it's not, I wouldn't say it's annoying. It's definitely good. I don't want people reading my messages, but
Yeah.
sometimes you feel like, you're working a feature, you want to debug something, you want to see how things are working, and sometimes it would be helpful to know what kind of message you send when you were sending a message, right? I mean, like you can inject messages in the chat bar, whatever, you can inject messages there. But you cannot read those messages, and it would be helpful to do that. But we don't have access to that at the same time. But the only exception is when you're dealing with Meta AI. But that one has a lot of privacy laws, and those are things that if you're not an engineer, if you're not like a general engineer and you're just AI, you're probably never gonna know, right? These privacy laws are big. They could take companies down if you don't follow these privacy laws. I mean, obviously there are
Mhm.
lawyers making sure that we cover all our assets when we're doing these features so that we don't get into trouble. But these are things that AI might not really have context of, and those are like more higher levels of engineering. But I do think that it's gonna disrupt. At the very least, I do think that it's going to make engineers more efficient, right? So there's so many things that you don't need to know about. Like, um, it's imagine using a calculator, right? Calculators
Mhm.
never really replaced mathematicians. You still study math in school. It just became a very useful tool to just so you don't have to worry about the multiplication tables. You don't have to worry about division and stuff like that. You just put in a
Yeah.
calculator, it gives you an answer, and then you're fine. There are people who like to go down in the fundamentals and do stuff without calculators.
Mhm.
But still, it's a very helpful tool to be efficient. I think that's what people, that's what's going to happen. And the other thing that's going to happen, I guess, with AI is this whole thing called vibe coding. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it's like
Uh,
essentially, so vibe coding is really about it's coding, but it's just on vibes. So you don't really need to be technical to be able to write code anymore. You just go to like some tools like Cursor or Windsurf, or you can even use Claude for vibe. I don't think people use Claude for vibe coding, but you have these vibe coding tools. I think there's a new one called Lovable. You have these vibe coding tools where they can just spit out enormous amount of code that works, right? And the work, let's say 95% of the time, the 5% of the time that it doesn't work, it's going to be held to fix, right? And these tools are just spitting out enormous amounts of code. Some are very unnecessary codes, but these tools will get better. Like thinking about where we started from ChatGPT, when it became the first publicly used, available AI thing that, I mean, AI has been there for a while. So, I mean, the way we interact with AI now, I should say, just to put that as a caveat,
yeah.
the way ChatGPT has grown so much from then till now, it's just been about 3 years, 3 or 4 years, just about
Yeah.
3 years. And it's insane the amount of things GPT can do now. So we do work with internal tools at Meta. We do work with, on my personal projects, I sometimes, I stayed away from using like vibe coding and AI tools to help me work. But, it's super helpful to use that. It kind of gives you a lot of context. You don't really need to think about a lot of things, and it helps you implement a lot of things faster.
Right. Yeah. So you touched on a few things I want to sort of circle back to. The first one being, using it and having hallucinations, etc. That's definitely something that I've found to be true. I think like, but to your point, I do think like it's gonna get better, and I think somewhat, good news, but also can be scary for certain professions, like consulting, for example, or just
Yeah.
like, just some professions where you're the one, aggregate information and just sort of like bring in a good output, But I guess on that point, do you feel like the way people can combat that is by what you mentioned, like privacy laws? So, for example, right, like in finance, for example, we use Bloomberg a lot, which
Hmm.
Bloomberg is like a powerhouse of data. And Bloomberg is, incorporating AI into the systems as well, but they have, for the most part, shielded other AI tools from getting access to the data. And so this idea of like gatekeeping their data is going to give them the edge. And I feel like maybe more like, industries or just more people should be thinking along those lines, especially if they're more concerned about AI coming in and replacing their job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's always tricky for, when AI is involved with stuff like these, and how to like actually properly guard against, some of these intrusions in AI in different fields,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Bloomberg is doing good, by, gatekeeping their data, but at the same time, even though they're incorporating AI into their stuff, at the same time, it's just gonna take a more powerful model that can give more accurate results for
Yeah.
them to go underwater. I mean, I'm sure Bloomberg is gonna do fine, eventually. Like they would always catch up. But yeah, it just takes some of these disruptive technologies to make people think again. I mean, when it comes to like even with, the hallucination and, people trying to, protect and privacy and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
you could be the good guy. And this is the argument a lot of people would like to make. And I would also like to make that argument. Like, you could be the good guy. You could try to go by the book, try to be private and all that. And I love when people try to be more private, right? But that there's no stopping a bad guy. It's a tool, right? There's no stopping a bad guy from taking advantage of that tool and doing something else. So even though you're trying to be, the good guy, your work is doubled because you have to prevent the bad guy from doing something else, with the tool. And that was just going to be like a one thing, just a 0 to 1. And you have to move from like 0 to 1 billion to make sure that the bad guy doesn't get access. Because in most cases, it just takes one thing to topple down like an entire company or something like that, right? Just one, mishandling of information, just one hack, one thing to topple down like an entire, company, right? So it's hard to guard against, that. You just kind of like have to adopt the technology and put like these safeguard measures in place. Like, I think, some people joke about how, they're not giving AI a kill switch. They're not making AI giving AI kill all command. They're making sure that AI does not have a kill all command because it's a new technology. We don't know where it's gonna go. I do think that it's a bit overrated, because we've really plateaued because what AI is doing right now in most cases is just like um, glorified autocomplete, right? But it's taking autocomplete to new levels. Like, it's not just able to autocomplete text now, it's able to autocomplete images, right? It's able to autocomplete videos. And the way it's working is like, hey, what would a typical video look like? And just begins to, think about things and just add things to it. And it's like, oh yeah, I have a typical video now. Can I make it less typical? Okay, what would a less typical video look like? And add a few things here and there. And then it autocompletes that, and that's what you get. I think, it's going to take another breakthrough of this technology or in this space for things to become really dire for a lot of industries. But definitely a lot of
Okay.
industries are going to suffer a lot. Yeah.
No, I think there are a lot of people who are in for a rude awakening, but just on the point about being a glorified um, you know,
Autocomplete tool.
autocomplete, I think that's a good point. I do think that, at least for us, right now, the way we're using AI is to just, like I mentioned, be efficient. And that just means like, for example, if there's some, earnings call or just like some sort of commentary, just give us
Yeah.
the summary, give us
Yep.
what's important and, just sift out the fluff, right?
Yeah.
You know, and essentially help us, but it's not making the decisions of what to buy and what to sell. We're still making
Yeah.
those decisions, but it's complementing us in
I
that way.
mean, yeah, that's also like probably up to a point in time. And then AI would be making. So there was this post by I think it was Sam Altman. He made a post recently, he tweeted or X, how do you even call it now? But he posted on Twitter, on X, I should say.
Thanks, yeah.
Yeah, he posted there like, ChatGPT is gonna be free for students. I don't know if it was a parody, it was a joke or not, but he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
ChatGPT is gonna be free for students until the end of May. I heard. That's what I heard. And now, I saw someone's comment, and the comment was like, hey, well, Now we're gonna have, AI students, and we're gonna let AI be the student, AI be the professor grading the work, and AI is gonna hand out the certificate to AI to graduate. Because like
Oh my
students are
God.
definitely gonna use AI, and if they're
Oh
using
yeah.
AI, the
You're already using it.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
professors are gonna be like, well, I mean, as a professor, if you want to make your life easier, you're probably gonna find, different ways to make it
Oh
simpler, make yourself more efficient. So AI is gonna grade the work now.
yeah.
Now, no, AI is going to determine who graduates because, like, well, that's going to be easy to use. Like, we're all using the tools, and then, AI is definitely going to be the one to graduate. AI failing AI, that's going to be crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
but like, these are these are some of the things that are happening with AI, like being an autocomplete tool. But it's definitely a huge disruptor.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean that would be funny if it happens. But I don't I want to circle back to the kill switch point that you
Yeah.
made. So, in the early days of AI, when ChatGPT came out, I was reading a few articles and there was one comment that someone made, you know, essentially the comment was that AI is able to find solutions to problems, but sometimes it's not the solution that is necessarily humane or quote unquote right based on human morals. So,
Yeah.
for example, right, he gave an example of a game where it's a game where you're driving through roads, and there's like water bodies and stuff like that around, and like you're getting points, and then once you cross the finish line with the most points, you win. And they essentially made AI play the game. And what AI did was just stay in a pool of water that when you calculate, I think the pool always brought new like points. So like let's say 5 points every 2 seconds.
Hmm.
So AI just circled around that pool for as long as it possibly could and gained the most amount of points and essentially won the game, right? But like,
Yeah.
it, you know, if this was a game that was given to a human being, that's not what you're trying to do because you're trying to get the most points, but also be the first to finish or be the quickest to gain the most points and then be the first to cross the finish line. So that's sort of like where I feel like, at least, anecdotally, there's a difference sometimes between what AI might deem as the right approach versus what we as a whole might deem as the right approach. I guess, from your company or just from, AI researchers out there that you've seen,
Hmm.
you know, do you think that people are trying to address that problem and people are actually like thinking about that, or people just are just trying to make, quote unquote, the most efficient outcome, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I mean, like, that's how, let's say sociopaths or psychopaths would behave, right? They care about themselves ultimately. It doesn't really matter. It's like the rest of us are just like tools.
Right.
Thankfully, hopefully I'm not a sociopath or a psychopath, but the rest
I
of us
hope not.
are just like tools for them to use. Like, well, they don't see, I wouldn't say it's their fault. Obviously, I'm not trying to like, play down, some of the horrible things they might do, but they just don't have some parts of the brain that lets them know that this is not good, right?
Right.
And I think that's a challenge we might face with AI. So here's the thing, here's how we try to solve the problem. So this was like from my research in college. So when we're doing reinforcement learning, which is basically the thing that I think spurred the whole transformer technology and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, so in reinforcement learning, or generally with AI, when you're training a model or you're getting a model to do something, right? There is something called exploration and exploitation, right? And if you put exploration to let's say it's 100, it's at a percentage. Usually it's one, between 0 to 1. But in percentage, let's say you put exploration to like 100%, the AI is going to find something that is good and ignore it and go and find many other things that would possibly good or bad. But what you want the AI to do is to take advantage of this good thing that we found and not throw it away. It's like if you're running a business and you find a good way to generate revenue, right? You want to protect that revenue model and not just go explore and try new things that would potentially most likely sink your business, right? But there's also the exploitation, the exploitation factor, and you put the exploitation factor in there. If you put it to 100%, AI is only going to do that one thing it's found to be helpful, and it's going to do that over and over again. It's not going to change with the times, right? And eventually it's going to become irrelevant, right? And that's where we have this balance. So usually what we do is like we set exploitation to be high. So sometimes it's like a 90% of exploitation and a 10% of exploration, which is basically what I think, following like the 80/20 rule, right? Which is what I
Mhm.
think most people should do. Like you go to your 9 to 5, you're really doing like exploitation, right? You're doing the things that you know are bringing you revenue and stuff like that. And then in the 20%, you use that to think about new potential ways of making money or making, making your life better. And that way, whatever you find, you can begin to exploit that, and that would eventually replace the thing that you were doing at first. Right. And that came from that 20% or 10% in this case for exploitation. I mean, exploration. Right. And that's how like the AI thing is. So that thing about exploitation, exploration, but it's how we can guard against something like that. But the other side is that um, AI is definitely gonna it's really computer code. It's like instructions, right? It's like, hey, I want you to get this outcome. So it's not gonna think about what's the best way to get this outcome. And before you get it to this outcome, you can put some, commands over there, which is I think that's how humans work. I'm not like a neuroscientist or anything like that or neurosurgeon, but
Mhm.
I think that's how humans work, right? We find, okay, what's the best outcome that I want to have, and begin to make like a cost benefit analysis. Like, do I want to pay the cost to get this benefit? If I
Right.
do want to pay the cost, then it means like maybe having a little extra, a little less, time of sleep. It means going to work a little bit early. Those are not things that people would say are traditionally good for your health, but it's okay. I'm going to be willing to do this for the next 5 to 6 years, right? 5 to 10 years, right?
Right.
And then after that, I can begin to do something else, right? But
Mhm.
humans are more attuned to, the ways that humans should behave in societies. And AI is not really attuned to the ways, we hope the tools would
Mhm.
behave in society. And I think
Yeah.
that's where the problem is. So we do have to put like these different measures to make sure that AI doesn't do something that we find as outrageous, right? I think when ChatGPT came for the first times, you know, there were many reports of ChatGPT being racist. There were many reports of it being, being like, how do I say, misogynist, misogynistic. You have like all these different things happening with AI, but there are measures in place to make sure that it doesn't produce something like that, even sometimes to a detriment. So it's like you ask it to generate something that should be like a historical fact, and then it does something else just to be more
Yeah.
attuned with the times, the way the
Yeah.
climate is with racism in the times. And that, might not be the best outcome that you want, but, we sound like overcompensate to make sure that we don't get the bad things that, the obviously horrible things that we don't want to have. Right.
No, yeah, I agree. I think this is a great segue. I definitely agree. That's a very good point with the exploration, exploitation. I think like that's something I didn't think about, and I'm glad you guys are thinking about it that way because I think, yeah, because I definitely don't want you guys to be 100% exploitation, right? Because I
Yeah.
just feel like people are gonna milk it too much, and then,
Yeah.
it's just not a good look. And I guess, it's a great segue into my next question. I think OpenAI, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
switched from a nonprofit model to a for-profit model. Do you think that's the right move by Sam? I know Sam is a smart man and all that, and has a lot of backing. I mean, the company is private, but it's worth what, 400, 300 billion?
Yeah.
That's crazy. But, just on that note, do you think they should have switched from a nonprofit model to a for-profit model?
I mean, there's a conversation between Sam and Elon. They could have that conversation. I mean, they're like on opposite sides. I know, like,
Yeah,
when OpenAI started, it was started for the goal to make sure that we don't have these challenges with AI that we're facing now. It was started to make
right.
sure that we could be as open as possible, so that we can, put all the measures in place so that AI doesn't take over
Mhm.
humans. I think, Musk's thing is like, hey, we want to preserve the human consciousness, right? That's why he's thinking about
Mhm.
exploration and going to Mars and stuff like that. And if AI
Mhm.
comes and threatens the human race in existence, or the existence of the human race, then we have a problem, right? And if you're driven by profit, it's going to be hard to expand, to put the extra resource to make sure that AI doesn't go, doesn't kill us, because your thing would be, well, I want to find the best way to make money, because if I don't find it, someone else is going to find it, and then they're going to make all the money, and my company is going to go bankrupt, right? But if you're really thinking about the human race and, exist in existence, like, yeah, this thing might not bring profit, but it's possible in the future if we can explore, like, it's like pharmaceuticals, right?
Right.
We don't know if this drug is actually going to work, so we're going to invest in hundreds or millions of drugs, right? And we're going to find that one drug that works, right? In this case, it's like when it's a nonprofit, you don't know if this particular method is going to work with AI, and, to protect the human race, but you're willing to invest all the time to find that one thing that could work. when you're for
Yeah.
profit, you don't really have the luxury of that. As for my opinion for whether it should be for profit or non-profit, personally, I really don't know. I think no, I think you could have like you could do like uh we have this thing called at Meta we have like the FAIR, which is the Facebook AI research program, and that's been responsible for even developing the Llama model. So the Llama model that we had was like a white paper that was from FAIR in Paris. And that was like, that's how we got our Llama and stuff like that. And we made it open source. So a lot of people are able to use that. And that's how the model grows and keeps getting better and better and better. I think, Mark was saying that,
Right.
making Llama open source was probably one of the best plays we've ever had, as a company, which I fully support that. Um, but having a closed system for AI, it's really not gonna work. It's gonna be hard. Open source code, I hear like, and I know it's really one of the best written codes out there because you have people who are really passionate about this particular piece of code, and you have millions of people maintaining it. If you work at Google or Meta, and your stuff are closed source, you only have like a couple engineers working on that particular thing, in the whole year, whereas it's open source, it's exposed to the entire world, right? I do think that, we need to make AI a bit more open, but not at the expense of a company in existence. Because if OpenAI goes, I don't think OpenAI is going down, at any point in time now. But if OpenAI goes down, that's like a lot of industries being killed. There are so many people building on top of OpenAI. They found something that works, and I think we should pursue that. It's like kind of like the tug of war between science and engineering. Engineers are more concerned about application of the sciences, and the scientists are more concerned about just knowing, just knowledge,
The theory.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So without engineers, we probably wouldn't have most of these things. At the same time, without the scientists discovering them, spending so much time investing in one specific field, we probably wouldn't have gotten the wherewithal to do what we're doing right now. So I think it's really just a
Right.
nice little dance between these two things, having it as a non-profit and a for-profit, and just having that battle. Like you want to have these two opposing sides play out, and we get the best outcome as consumers.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that's actually a much better answer than I envisioned. I think that's a very well thought out answer. Just trying to weigh the odds of or the pros and cons of each outcome. I guess, last question about AI and we'll move on to other things. You know, DeepSeek was, something that, caused a lot of these AI stocks to go down. My portfolio was down. I was just like, man, what's going on? But, I guess you're a coder. I think they also made their code open source. And truthfully, I have no idea what it is or how it works. So, can you explain to me, like, were they able to actually like have chat GPT like outcome with, less sort of like firepower? So like
Yeah.
less chips, less, processing power, etc.
Yeah, at this point it's debatable. It's very debatable. But on the night when it happened, I forget which night it was. It was like, I don't know if it was like a Monday or Tuesday. I had a
Uh-huh.
friend come over from NVIDIA. The person works in NVIDIA. He obviously is like very, very bullish on NVIDIA.
Uh-huh.
And obviously also getting company stocks from NVIDIA as well. And he's like, yeah, there's a time to buy more NVIDIA. And he's like, look, think about it. If a company has been able to produce, and that was when we didn't know much about what happened, but we just heard the news. But if a company has been able to produce a model like this, where it's able to do all these crazy things with just less processing power, wouldn't it make more sense that in the future, you'd still want to have more processing power to do bigger things? It's like, and people panic sold at that point in time. I think Nvidia is going to be fine. I do think, in some cases it's like an overpriced asset, but I think that it's going to be fine. It's not going down anytime soon, right?
Yeah.
But the thing about DeepSeek is like, DeepSeek is we're getting more information now that it's possible that it was a cover up. They didn't really use that low level, stuff that they said they did to run
Okay.
this model. It's very possible they were using like high level chips. Now, this is also where it goes into like a sort of like geopolitical, space where it's
Yeah.
about country wars and stuff like that,
Mhm.
because China does want to project like being a powerhouse in AI, and the
Yeah.
DeepSeek model is pretty good and it's free. It's pretty good. It did put like, and so it makes the US scared, in a way. It's like, wow, China's found this model and they're not even doing it with the most powerful stuff and they can achieve the same outcomes,
Yeah.
right? Why don't we invest more in this thing and, try to figure out what China's done, you
Yeah.
know? So, that competition comes in between the countries. But at the same time, it's also, I think, a rich source of competition between the, for the, different companies, and it just makes the consumers' lives better. Because now it's like, well, OpenAI is gonna come out with your better model. I think DeepSeek was the first one to come up with this, like projecting their reasonings, like telling you the steps of thinking, and then OpenAI released their O3 model that does reasoning. And I think obviously the ChatGPT is, I think it's better. I've been using it, it's better for reasoning and stuff like that. And I think that's what, happened with DeepSeek. I don't think DeepSeek is a huge threat to this thing. If anything, I just think it's way better for the consumers, like way, way better. And now Gemini, I think the Gemini 2.5 model is absolutely, it's crazy. Like, I think I heard Google is going to add, and obviously I'm not working in Google, so this cannot be proprietary information, but I heard Google is going to add like this AI, tab when it comes to their search results. So when you search on Google, you see you have like all images, news, shop and stuff like that. They're gonna add like an AI thing. Google search is insanely used. If they add that AI tab to it, it means that you're getting like AI responses and stuff like that. And that is gonna be used massively, right? All this is making the consumer's life easier. So if you don't like ChatGPT, well, you have DeepSeek. If you don't like DeepSeek, well, you have OpenAI. If you don't like any of them, you go for the best, which would be Meta AI, just plugging in here for Mark Zuckerberg. But you go for Meta AI, and that's what you should use, obviously.
Yeah.
But in any case, these different models are just all going to be helping for the consumer. The other thing you need to look at is also the privacy laws. I don't know if China is, really concerned about privacy, as much as, the US and the EU and stuff like that are concerned about privacy. So that's something that you should look at. But I think for a lot of people, it's just really a small price to pay to get, efficiency in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. You should bill Mark for that shameless plug for Meta AI. But um but I know I said last question, but
Yeah, go for
now
it.
truly a last question on AI. Do you think AI is taking away critical thinking, right? I have friends
Damn.
who to a certain degree, like if they think about something, they don't even go, consider, let me Google search it and then find articles and then let me read for myself. They're just like, no, let me just go to ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, and I'm gonna trust with 100% confidence that this thing is right. Like, do you think, with the onset of AI and large language models that, people are going to have less critical thinking skills moving forward?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's always a worry. Just to close the loop on the previous question, I do think that the DeepSeek, I personally think they did not use the low chips that they claimed they did. I think they use higher level chips. But that's just to close the loop on that. For this thing about AI making people essentially making people dumber, which is
Well, I
what
didn't say it like that, but
if you're not thinking critically, you're essentially making yourself dumb. I mean, like it's fine. For instance, like I personally do not care a lot about clothes, right? I don't care about, jewelry. I don't care about, flashy, hairstyles or, anything like that. I don't care a lot about that. I wouldn't invest any time to think critically. I'll be dumb in that field. If someone tells me like, "Oh, have you seen the new Louis Vuitton bag?" It's like, "What is that?" It's like, it's like I remember I was in, we're going for this trip at work, which is one of the
uh-huh.
perks you get. We have like this offsite. We went to the aquarium, Monterey Aquarium, some time back, and
Yeah,
on the trip, I was speaking to some of the other employees from Meta, and they were talking about a Birkin. I definitely know a Birkin because I've heard like in many of the
yeah,
UK
yeah,
rap.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
worth like I don't know, like 10 grand or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's worth a lot. And we're like, oh,
yeah.
this is a fancy, flashy bag. They're talking about all these expensive stuff and stuff like that they like.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I really don't care about that. And it's like, oh, would you spend what luxury item would you
Hmm.
buy clothes for luxury items? I'm like, no, I'm not gonna buy clothes for luxury items. I'd probably buy a supercar. I love cars, but that's like maybe one I think the novelty would wear off if I do that. But all I'm trying to say is that, it's fine to be dumb or to not think critically in some areas. You can't think critically for everything that you do, right?
Right.
I think that you kind of have to make a choice because to go the easier route to make it more efficient, to make yourself, to make things more efficient, or you go the more difficult route if you truly care about something. It's the same thing when Google came up, people are like, our kids are not going to be going to the library anymore. It's going to make them dumber. It's like, yeah, people rarely ever go to the library anymore because we have like a huge index of, information on Google,
Right.
right? People who care about, libraries and stuff like that are going to take advantage of that and go to the library. But in effect, it's going to make your life simpler. But there are some areas that I feel like, absolutely thinking critically is important. Um, And there's some areas that would make your life easier if you choose to do it. So for instance, as an engineer, as a contributing engineer, like an individual contributor as an engineer, I do think that at this point you need to build your skills to understand what you're getting from AI, right? So you need to understand the fundamentals. I don't think you need to, it's the same thing like machine code. People were coding. I don't know if people were coding machine code, but we had like assembly language, and people were using like assembly language, which is closer to machine code. And I'm sure when we had like these higher level programming languages that were more closer to the English language, people were going like, ah, I'm sure the old guys were like, ah, so people won't be able to code in assembly anymore. It's like, well, we don't really need that, right? So I think as much as you can get to the fundamentals, you should as an engineer because your sort of like job depends on that, being able to understand. Like it's all in the bit for understanding. I do think you need to use like AI tools to make your work more efficient, but you need to understand what code the AI is giving you and be able to tell like, make the decisions on whether this is beneficial or not. Because AI can spit a lot of seemingly good code and it's not going to be beneficial to where it's just going to make it bloated and not optimized and it's going to run slow and stuff like that. But at the
Right.
same time, if you're like a technical project manager or a product manager, right? And you just want a quick mock-up of it's like, hey, we're discussing this feature. It's like I want a quick mock-up of this feature. You just go to Cursor, you go to Windsurf, or you go to Lovable, and you're like, hey, could you produce something like this for me? I just want to see how it works. So it's a nice way to do like a proof of concept.
Right.
But when it comes to like a field you care about, I think you need to, not go the lazy route. You actually need to invest in it. Like it's like stock market, stock trading. Like if it's not a field you're interested in, obviously just, go the easy route, buy the index funds and stuff like that. You don't need to do your own research, which, I'd recommend. But if you really care about that, you want to, tweak things here and there. You can begin to look into like individual stocks, things people have not heard about. Try to
Mhm.
do like more fundamental analysis on different things people might not know, and make choices, make your bets that way. So I think it's really
Yeah.
just, a function of where you are and what you care about.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's a very well thought out answer. I think, yeah, I agree 100%. I definitely think, I don't think it's making us dumb necessarily, but I think like if I can avoid having to spend 2 hours to read something that isn't really, at least in my eyes, isn't going to add value to my life, then yes, I'm happy to just,
Yeah,
chat GPT it real quick and get an
yeah.
answer. And yeah, move on from there.
Yeah, yeah, but critical thinking skills are definitely, I'd say definitely, I don't know, I mean, I'm just like in my 20s. I can say they're definitely on the decline from, the olden days, but I think like AI does make people lazy when it comes to thinking. Um, because it's like, well, you can get everything. There's not like it's not like a tool specific for one industry. It's a tool that could be used in almost any industry at this point in time.
Yeah,
So it's just making people not want to think about stuff. It's like the first thing they do is like go to ChatGPT and listen to the
yeah,
answer without verifying any source.
I
But
agree.
you could use ChatGPT as a way to teach you stuff. So you could have conversations with like, oh, ChatGPT gives you an answer. It's like, hey, what's this answer saying? Why did you choose to do this? That kind of engagement would teach you a lot. And I think it's just a more expedited way to learn. But I don't think people are doing that. And I think that's like, a regrettable way to use a tool because it's so powerful and you can learn a lot from it within a short time.
Yeah, but I would say I do know people who are using that, and especially at least I am also using that in a way to, because I cover chems, paper packaging, metals and mining, and a lot of times at least what I did to sort of catch up or get up to speed is trying to understand the drivers of those various industries, and so using AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., having a conversation, trying to really go into the nitty-gritty about what actually
Yeah,
drives company performance. I think that's so yeah, to your point, I think that's how people should be using it, and hopefully, we get more widespread adoption on that side. But
yeah.
moving away from AI, want to go into, just you personally, right? So success, right? Success is a big word. I think people define it very differently here and there. For you specifically, what do you define success to be for yourself? And
Yeah.
that's in your career, in life, 20 years from now, if I meet, 40-year-old Micah and I'm just like, we've made it, what would that mean? Right?
Yeah, someone come and help me. The VP is trying to ask me very difficult questions. I'd much rather talk about AI. But yeah, that's definitely a tricky one, success. I think personally I define success differently at different points in my life. Um, at this point, I'd say at this point till I can, till I die, probably at least the way I'm thinking about how I would define success till I die. I think it could change in the next 10 years or so, and I'll have a different definition till I die. But for now, I think for me, success would be more like no regrets, I would say, right? You know, I have this thing where I say like achievement doesn't come from being special. It comes from a systematic and trackable approach to life and to success. And I want my life to be a testament to that. And the reason I say that is, there are many times where I regret taking some actions. And I don't know, one of the times I regret, taking or not taking some actions has been like when I was in college, I didn't really pay attention to, getting a job, and I wasn't really putting in the effort to get a job and stuff like that. And I was like, dude, if I had actually spent time at the beginning of college learning these skills, I probably would have been at the top of my field at this point in time. Right? Obviously not that's an exaggeration, but I probably would have been somewhere, where I'm not at this point in time. So I think just sometimes I go like, if I'm given a project or something at work, I'm like, if I paid the debt to learn the skills, this project would be easier for me to do and I don't have to suffer now. Right.
Right.
And I think for me, just the idea of putting down the debt as soon as possible so that I don't suffer in the future is the idea of success to me. So I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. When I was looking for a job at Meta, previously I got, rejected from Bloomberg. You keep talking about the Bloomberg term,
Oh
they
well, sorry,
rejected me, but
sorry,
yeah.
man.
But I got rejected from Bloomberg, and it was mostly my fault. Obviously, they gave me like a leak code hard problem, but just you don't want to do that to engineers. Don't give them leak code hard problems when they're doing their coding interviews. But in any case, like I was like, after every interview I've ever taken, I'd come on and be like, huh, if I'd done things differently, I think I would have ended up somewhere else. I probably would have gotten the job if I'd studied more, if I started doing lead code more, if I'd engaged more and stuff like that, I probably would have gotten the job. So when I was getting to into Meta, I think I was telling my friends, I even recorded my journey online. I was telling my friends, I was like,
Yeah.
yo, this thing that I'm gonna do it such that I don't come out and say I could have done better, right? I just want to put in my effort to know that this is what I would do, right? And so when I got into Mana, I did put in my effort to get. So after the interview, I was talking to one of my friends. He was like, "Yo, Micah, you should prepare for some other places, do something." I was like, "I think I'm gonna get the job," and it was like, even if I don't get a job, I think I'm happy with my performance, and that to me felt like a time where I was like, "Okay, I actually don't regret the actions I've taken,"
Right.
right? And I think obviously it's also a function of knowing what actions to take, and taking those actions. But it's always a choice. Like you choose where you want to go, and if you want to go there, you learn from your mistakes and then you go there. I think that's really a definition of success. So, I don't think everyone needs to become like a billionaire or a zillionaire or whatever that is. I think people can find success in different things. I do think that just getting better, putting in the effort, getting better, paying down the debt for something you truly care about, I think that's like an incremental feeling of success. I don't think success is like a point you get to. I think it's something that, I mean, like obviously you can measure some things like money, you can measure things like status and stuff like that. And those would contribute to feeling successful. But I do think that just being better than you were yesterday and, knowing that you actually got better because you learned something, I think that's ultimately success. But at the same time, please don't throw your financial life in jeopardy because you want to feel successful. Like do all these things so that you don't regret. Because if you just
Yeah.
pursue your passions all the time, I think I should point that I think I'm grateful. I'm at a point where I think like my passions align with the thing I'm doing as work. So I think I'm super lucky for something like that. But I think like if you just pursue your passions without thinking about the responsibilities you have in the world as a functioning member of society, and then you might be jeopardizing your future. And you say you want to feel successful by following your passions, but you got to know that you're not just like a lone person in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think for me, the way I define success is in line with what you said. Like, I think success is if you're able to get what you want out of life, whatever that
Yeah,
is.
I
So,
agree.
if you want to be a billionaire, whether it's money, and I think, a lot of people have a bit of a, hesitation to say it's money. Like, if money is what you want, hey,
Yeah,
let
just
it
go
be
for it.
what you
Yeah.
want. Exactly. Like there's no shame in wanting money at all. But yeah, for me, ultimately, that's what I view success to be. It's, just getting what you actually want in life. And to your point, I have certain regrets too. Like I remember coding around 10, 13 years old. This
Oh
was
yeah,
when I
dude,
was
you
at
you actually even told me about Code Academy. Was it Code Academy or
Code
Code Force?
Academy.
Code
Exactly. Yeah,
Academy. Yeah,
yeah.
you were telling me about it. I think it was in
Right.
IC college.
Yeah.
You're like, yo, Micah, I think you called me differently then, but
Yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
like, you was like,
But
oh, check
yeah,
this out. Yeah,
yeah. No,
yeah,
yeah. So I mean that was something my dad sort of introduced me to, and I personally regret not actually taking it seriously. Just because, no, I mean seriously, I wish I knew how to code very well right now. Like, I know how to code Python, kind of, but I wish I, knew how to. At least I took it super seriously, and that's what I'm trying to prevent moving forward in my life.
Yeah,
Like even, with this podcast, for example, or just doing other things in life. Like I'm trying to be able to at least go to sleep at night knowing that, I tried to get to where I wanted to get to. And
yeah,
like 10 years from now, I won't look at myself and be like, man, I wish I just, taken a shot and did that.
yeah,
Um, but hopefully, we're on the right path, and hopefully it becomes something. Because I mean, we've talked about it off air, right? Talking to you
yeah,
about doing that trade-in algo,
yeah,
and that's one that I wish if I knew how to code now, like super code, like that's something that probably would have already been built. But
yeah,
unfortunately, it's not built, and it's fine. But it's just something that one of my regrets at least. So, but in life. Just moving away from that too, just you talked about it's sort of aligned with success, but you talked about determination, right? What keeps you determined? Are there any, specific, role models or mentors that you sort of one have personally or people you aspire to, to be like, whether it's, you listen to some sort of podcast, some sort of, you know, books, whatever, like just talk about how you're able to sort of frame your mindset and determination towards, what success and your goals for yourself.
yeah. I think, there was this experiment that was done. I forget I don't think I've ever really bothered to do research into who did that experiment. So I can't say I forget who it is, but I just need to come clean. But in any case, the experiment was really about like, I don't know if it was mouse or rat and cheese, but they were like, they tie some kind of like, some kind of string to a mouse to measure how hard the mouse pulls, right? And then they put cheese in front of the mouse, right? And they see how the mouse would pull towards the cheese, right? And let's say pull like 20% of its effort.
Right.
And so the other thing they did was to introduce a cat behind the mouse. And then they began to measure how hard the mouse pulled. Let's say it pulled like 2,000%. I don't think that was the case. Just paraphrasing that study that was done. But
Yeah.
basically, I think, that's how I get motivated. There's obviously something I want to get to. Um,
Mhm.
there's like this sort of like happy feeling I want to get to. And then there's fear, right? Fear is also a pretty good motivator. I have this thing where I call it like the theory of motivation.
Mhm.
It's like obviously it's not a scientific theory or any
No, it's
well thought
good.
out
Hey,
theory, but
you
it's
might
like
be a revolutionary, so come on, just let us hear it.
but it's more like anything that motivates you to do what you need to do to get you to your goal, you do it, right? It doesn't matter whether, sometimes, I tell myself like, sometimes the motivating factor for me would be my mom. I love my mom so much. She took care of me a lot. So it's
Mhm.
like, but I don't talk to my mom a lot. I don't think I have that, I think I do love my mom. I don't know why I'm putting this on here, but
We can cut this out if you
oh,
want.
no,
We
it's
can cut
fine.
it
It's
out.
fine. I do love my mom, but I'm not, socially, I don't talk a lot, but I think I still harbor feelings for my mom, a lot of good feelings for my mom.
Mhm.
But it's not like I don't miss, sleep overnight if, let's say, I don't think about my mom today or don't talk to my mom today, right? I don't lose sleep over that. But I do think like
Mhm.
she has a special place in my heart. So sometimes
Right.
my mom just wanting to do things for my mom is like a huge motivating factor. Other times it just doesn't matter. Like I
Mhm.
wouldn't think, bat an eye, I want to do something for my mom. No. At other times it's because there's someone at work who is outperforming me and I want to beat that person, right? And
Yeah.
that's like my
Yeah.
motivation. Other times it's like I set a goal for myself. I want to prove to myself that I can actually do something. And that's my motivation
Mhm.
at the time. So I think motivation really is just like a tool you can use like in different places, at different stages of your life. Sometimes you'd be so low on motivation, and then it's just like maybe you just realize that, oh shoot, I actually want to be a billionaire so I can prove to my friends from my childhood who were wrong about me. Like I want to prove them wrong. That's a healthy. I mean, like obviously there are healthier sources of motivation and stuff like that, but that's a
Yeah.
good source of
Yeah.
motivation. Like it gets you to
Yeah.
do the work at that point in time. You want to prove
Yep.
someone wrong. That's probably not the best way to go about things, but it's definitely helping you to get to the outcome. So it doesn't really matter what gets you from point A to point B, what gets you towards success. All that matters is movement that you actually get there. So when it comes to me and motivation, that's how I like to think about things. That's how I like, I mean, like I'm lazy sometimes. Like I don't do the work I need to do sometimes. There are other times when I'm like, maybe my mom's not gonna motivate me. I just think about, oh shoot, yeah, I do want to be rich. I do want to be wealthy, right? I do want to get to some measurable financial wealth, call that success. I want to get there. So like if I'm just lazying around, that's not gonna get there. That's not gonna get me there. So the fear of not having that is gonna drive me to do it. But I think
Yeah.
the biggest motivator for me, it's really gonna be regret. Because, when you're alone and you have a lot of time, where you're not going to work, where you're not like in your 9 to 5 thinking about doing work for, work at Meta or whichever company you're in, you have a lot of time to be in your head. And those moments can be very, very, debilitating, right? Those moments can be very, very, very difficult. If you're in your head and you're like, oh shoot, these were things I could have done, but I never did it. That's why I think people like to get high, people like to get drunk, because when you're there, you can't really hold one thought for a long time, right? So you don't think about any of your problems. Those problems are not real. But when you're sober and then you can hold those thoughts, they're definitely going to eat you up, right? And that's the thing, that when you have a lot of time, you have a lot of time to think, So sometimes, when I'm trying to get to bed, it's like, dude, like, sometimes it takes me a long time to sleep, to fall asleep, right? It's
Yeah.
like those minutes, it's like my thoughts eating me up. It's like, dude, you could be doing something, right? Sometimes you just need to give it a rest, but you could be doing some stuff, or you could have been doing some stuff, in the past you never did. And as you grow older, you get more and more time to yourself, because you get old, you can't perform physically as you used to. So you'd be in bed a lot, you'd be resting a lot. And that would be a lot of times when your mind is still active and your mind would just begin to eat you up. So I think that fear of regret in the future, like I don't want to see my, 80 or so year old self having like these mind-boggling regrets. And I think that's like a fear factor that sort of like motivates me to pursue my goals, because it's just a couple years of sacrifice, of intense sacrifice, and then the rest of the time I don't have to deal with my mind eating me up.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree. It's a few years of hard work for a lifetime of, achievement and profit to gain, right? I think, and
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. I think for me, regret is number one, fear number one. I think, my mom too as well. Maybe it's, because we're both African, I guess. Maybe that's or Ghanaian. I think maybe that's part of the reason. But, because, in Ghana or Africa in general, I think, there's not like a retirement plan necessarily, right? Like in
Yeah.
the US, people have Social Security, etc. But for the most part, at least from my lived experiences, your parents are sort of banking on you to
Yeah.
take care of them, right?
Yeah.
Once they become, older and things like that. And so I think that's also one. But I also think the haters piece is
Oh, the hater space is
definitely
definitely.
it's definitely motivating because I don't know, I just feel like it's such a huge motivator. And at least for me, I'm not really super flashy. I think like, I keep a good chunk of my life private, but like
Yeah.
sometimes you just do have to like let people realize that, you know what, hey, like
Yeah.
we're okay. We're okay. But that's that's just, the mind talking, just never
Yeah,
mind
I
on
mean,
that.
like you
But
do get a lot of dopamine hit, some kind of
yeah,
like good satisfaction when, you prove someone
exactly.
wrong. But it's only gonna last a
Exactly.
few days or hours or
Exactly. Yeah.
weeks,
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's definitely
Yeah.
a good motivator. Yeah.
It doesn't last long. And I think for me, actually, one other thing that I think motivates me too is being able to see my success in other fields and being able to see that like, oh, like I actually put my mind to this and I was able to actually achieve it and complete it.
Yeah.
It's really reassuring that like reinforces my capabilities, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, like you're actually capable of doing this. You're not
Yeah.
just like a scrub. You're not just dumb or something. Like you can actually do it if you put your mind to it. And I think for me, that's one of the things that really drives me as well.
Yeah.
But
Spoken like a gentleman who has not been dumbed down by ChatGPT.
relax.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's definitely true. That's definitely true. I think, I keep telling my friends, like, they ask me why, but I tell some of them, like, the thing I want to do actually, before I die is really to leave a legacy. I'm sure when I die, I'm not gonna remember what I'm doing on Earth, if there is like an afterlife. I'm not gonna know. But just knowing that I'd be happy on my deathbed if, let's say, I left something that was sort of like beyond me. I really want to build something that would be massive, right? I don't want to invest into a lot of, I think that would be like my big regret. If I don't build something that would be massive, I would regret that a lot. I think in many cases, really just pick what you want. Just choose something to care about and just go hard on that. It could be different things at different points in time, but
Yeah.
just pick something you truly care about. And I think, it's not like the stars need to be aligned. Sometimes it's like the stars can be aligned for like five different things or 28 million different things. You really just need to pick one or a few things and choose to go hard for that, right? It doesn't matter about talents or anything like that, but you can pick something and just choose that and go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, this is great. This is a good segue into our next topic. Want to talk about just, overall aspiration and ambition. So I know, personally off air and also I think on your YouTube channel, which by the way, I'll give you the link in the description. You guys go check out his page. He actually is actually, he's probably doing me more of a service than anything because he
No
has,
way.
bigger platform,
No
all
way.
that. But anyway, I'm gonna link it in the description so you can check out his YouTube channel. He has, great insights, just talks about him getting into tech as well as just after that talking about
Appreciate it.
his app
Appreciate
that he's building. But on that page, you have video about, $1 million goal, right?
it.
Which you're
Yeah.
trying to reach $1 million in by the end of 26, if I'm not mistaken.
You're not
Um,
mistaken. I hoped you were mistaken, but you're not mistaken.
yeah. But just talk to me about that, right? Like, talk to us about it. What one fueled that goal, if there was any like real like, primary, reasoning behind that, and also how do you necessarily, um, or what's the pathway to get to a million by the end of 2026? Yeah.
Like if I knew how to get to a million within by 2026, I'd be super happy. I think I'm still at a stage where, still trying things and figuring things out. Obviously made some money here and there, but still
Yeah.
trying to get as close as I can to the goal within this stipulated time. But the way this goal came about was so I was in a rough time of my life during college, like my sophomore to junior years of college. It was a really rough time for me. It's not something, I speak about that a few times, but I was even in therapy and stuff like that, very suicidal, just
Mhm.
not knowing what to do with life anymore, and it was definitely a very rough time. So there was this thing that sort of like,
Sorry to hear that.
yeah, no worries, man. We're over it now. You need to be like Andrew Tate, be a hard guy, no therapy, nothing like that.
No, 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 man. Hey, listen,
But
we'll,
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
we'll touch on that a little bit later, but yeah, but go
yeah.
ahead.
So
Yeah.
So during the time, one thing that kept me going was like this friend of mine, like a friend, a peer mentor of mine, who works at
Mhm.
Microsoft. He used to do this challenge called 100 Days of Code, right? And I used to do that as well. That's how I began to really get drilled down into code and really become good at coding. And he would do 100 Days of Code. I did that, and there was this time he did this thing called 100 Days of Discipline, and this 100 days of discipline, I saw that I was like, huh, that's actually pretty cool. So when I was a time in my life where like really there was really nothing to live for, I was like, look, I was in therapy at that time. And I think, this just a segue, but a lot of times
Mhm.
people who are suicidal, it's like they find that nothing in their life is working. So it's like there's nothing to live for. So what therapists and counselors would do is try to give them one thing in their life where they feel like they can fix and, take control and make better. And I'll give them
Right.
at least something to hold on to in life. So I think my therapist and me, this was without my therapist. I decided to do like this 100-day challenge, 100 days of discipline, where I was doing three things. First was music, so I learned how to play the guitar. The next was yeah, the next was sales. So I did, just learn some business and stuff like that with sales. And I think I forget what the last one was working out. So I began to go to the gym seriously every day for 100 days. I don't think, did I take rest days during those days? I don't know, probably maybe one or two rest days, but I think I was going like every day, 7 days a week because it was college and the gym was always open for students. So I started that 100 day of discipline challenge and that kept me going, until like I was out of therapy. Because therapy was before like close to a year in therapy. By the tail end of therapy, that's when I started this 100-day challenge. So it kept me going. And after that, I was like, huh, this thing sort of like gave me something to live for in my life while I was there. let me hop onto a next challenge that will give me something to live for the next few years of my life. And I'm not advising people to hop onto challenges and doing stuff like that. Obviously, you need to have a longer term perspective on life, right? But this challenge is also a small piece of what I want to do, like in a longer term perspective of life. So this $1 million challenge is like, it was arbitrary. It's like, hey, let me just do something that will be challenging, really hard, and document the process, right? I've failed in documenting the process for a while, but I'm gonna reboot that. You know, when I get to a subscriber number on YouTube, I'm going to reboot that and start documenting the process every single day for people to know how the journey goes and what it's like to try to do something that is really hard within 3 years. So that's how the journey came about. Started planning to do that from 2023, the summer of 2023. Officially started at the beginning of 2024, and now we're like almost partway through, like halfway through the 2026 mark. And obviously learned so many things that probably wouldn't have learned if I didn't try to take this, seriously. And that's how the whole journey came about, just trying to do that. I think for me, the thing I want to let people know is that, the reason why I'm even putting it out there and recording is like, I want people to know that you can do something hard, if you track what you're doing, if you care about it, you could do something hard and probably, attain success, or you can get close to that. But I do want to attain success. I do want to get to that $1 million. I've had friends tell me that, it's fine if you don't get to $1 million. And absolutely, I think it'll be fine. I don't think anyone's gonna kill me if I don't get to $1 million,
Oh
right?
no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no, no,
But,
no.
I don't think I'm losing anything if I don't get to like I'm
Right.
not gonna lose my job if I don't get to $1 million. Nothing is gonna
Yeah,
really go to, nothing's gonna really go down the drain. But
yeah.
I do think I want people to know that, hey, if you try to put your mind to something, you can actually achieve it. I want my life to do that. I want to show that in my life. That's not even putting the journey out there. Yeah.
No, yeah. No, yeah, that's great. I mean, I saw that the goal, but I never knew this was the reason behind that. I mean, I'm glad that you're doing better now. I think this. I mean, I've known you for what, like over 10 years,
Yeah,
maybe
over
like
10 years.
15 years now.
Probably.
Um,
Yeah.
something like that. And I mean, you know, firsthand sort of commentary, I think, yeah, you do have a lot to live for. So I'm glad that at least you're able to anchor yourself with some sort of goal, and
Yeah.
then
Thanks so much, man.
push through. So I'm glad that, you were able to go through that tough time. But no, I mean, $1 million, yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, you detailed a great plan to get it in the video. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, to
Yeah, a
your
lot
point,
of things have changed from
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of things have changed, but I also think like even like to your point about not getting there, I think
Yeah.
any forward progress towards that is a massive win. So I don't even,
Amazing.
it's not any sort of, like I talk to friends who are like, trying to pursue, for example, like get to a master's program. So they have to study for a GRE. And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, well, if I do it and I'm not successful, it's gonna be embarrassing. I'm just like, listen, no one is gonna put this on CNN and broadcast to the whole world that like, hey, this person failed. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do what you want. If you don't get it, it's fine. Like you're
Yeah.
still, pushing forward. So that's
Yeah.
that's that's how I view it.
Yeah. Great.
But you also touched on a few things with projects that you're working on. So one is the time tracking app that you've been working on.
Yeah.
Can you talk about one, the use case for it and, you know, progress so far and, what
Yeah.
people can expect once it officially launches?
Yeah, so the time tracking app obviously is not something that I'm not even trying to make it like a premium app for people to use. The reason I started doing the time tracking app was I love these challenges, and I know people don't like challenging themselves and doing
All
stuff
right.
because it's nice and it feels more comfortable to just relax and chill. But I challenged myself to build an app, and put it on the App Store in 60 days. And that's where the time tracking app came. I really just wanted
Okay.
to master iOS development because, on the WhatsApp team, I'm working consumer AI on iOS and stuff like that. So, there's some other
Mhm.
parts of the job that I do that are not iOS. But,
Mhm.
in presenting the app, presenting the AI features to the world, I'm on the iOS side of things. I'm like, hey, I never did iOS in school, never did any of that. I want to learn iOS. So I think the thing that's working for me right now is really having that public contract with people. It's like, yo, Micah said he's going to do this. So yeah, Micah must be a man of his word. Let him try and
Yep.
let's see what's happening, right? So that
Yeah.
public contract sometimes keeps me up and makes me put in the work because I release like almost every day I put out a video about the progress of the app, right?
Yeah, I've
There's some
seen.
times when I
Yeah.
bundle the days, together, but like generally
Yeah.
almost every day I put out a progress video on the app, right? Those are
Yeah.
not like high quality production videos. They're not videos I'm hoping that like millions of people would see. Well, I'm hoping people don't see those videos, because they're very bad videos, very, very bad videos. But
Yeah.
because I'm putting it out there and there are some people who are actually following the app and, looking at how progress is going. It's like, yeah, I need to force myself to actually put out some code. And this is one of those things where I can just come and talk and show nothing. I need to show
Yeah.
the progress, and that would come by putting the work in coding. And I think as
Yeah.
part of this thing, because I'm trying to master iOS development, I decided not to use any, AI predictive autocomplete. I do use ChatGPT to architect, to think about stuff. It's like, hey, how do I build this? Because I don't know what I don't know. So rather than
Right.
going to take like a full course in iOS development, I can actually ask ChatGPT to tell me like the things I don't know and see how I can implement that, right? But most of these coding editors now have like this predictive autocomplete,
Uh-huh.
assistive, sort of like thing where when you're typing, actually, when you press tab or enter, it can actually spit out like functions, like whole lines of code for you.
Oh,
Like autocomplete works in many cases, which is fine, but like autocomplete is based on the libraries you use in the code you put in before. It can look through that and say, okay, well, you have this function called like get money, right? So if you start typing GET, it's gonna assume that you're gonna call get money. But this other function, this predictive autocomplete assistive thingy, it's more like you start typing, you've not defined the function already. You start typing like func get, and it produces get money and defines and implements that function for you. And I decided not to use that because it made me lazy in thinking about code. This is like a new field. I don't know much about it. I want to, train myself on the fundamentals, right? But it's really just a fun little project. I'm not trying to monetize a project, but it's generally to help me get better at iOS development. And I've made some
yeah.
good progress with the app. I think we have like a beta version out on test flight. But I'm just gonna finish that one. Hopefully it'll be done in like the next 15 days. But that's really what the app is, time tracking. I track my time a lot. Only work
Yeah.
time. So anytime I'm doing work, I track it. I show it even at work. Even at Meta work, I track that time over there on the Meta computer because it's like it's classified information because I do put details there about the stuff I'm working on. So I can't
Uh-huh.
really put it out there. But on my
Right.
personal work, I also track that as well. And I see how much time I'm spending doing the code, how much time I'm spending on YouTube, how much time I'm spending on some other things. If I'm playing soccer or something like that or football, I don't track that at all, right? So it's just work time. So that's where the whole time tracking thing came. It seemed like a very low level thing, low commitment thing, low effort thing to build, but I could learn a lot about iOS development from that. And that's how the whole thing came about. So progress will be made. Hopefully the app will be done in like within the next 15 days. Y'all can download the app on the App Store. I don't think many people are gonna, I hope people don't download it because I don't think I have money to maintain, because if more people use it, I have to
Oh yeah,
start
you need
paying for
more cloud.
services and skill and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just something for me to learn iOS development.
Yeah. Well, you guys heard that here first. Everyone go download it when it comes out in 15 days. But no, I'm just joking. But yeah, you talk about time tracking. I know you interviewed Kevin Wong, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. He's like the master of time tracking.
Dude, it's insane.
Um, can you talk about time tracking, right? Like, what are the lessons you learned from that video, like, or time tracking in general? Like, is there like a specific set of hours you need to learn or commit to something in order to be an expert? Like, is it like, just walk through that a
Yeah, I
second.
think it's really for most of the time tracking is mostly retroactive time tracking. So it's like you just go see what you've done. And I think that gives you insights into what you're actually good at and what you would like potentially like to do, right? So time tracking, it's really like tracking anything like finance tracking. There's a
Right.
way to do you track your finances and it helps with your budget the next time. It's like, how much money
Right.
did I actually spend buying food last year? It's like, well,
Way too
do you want
much.
to do you want to still do that? And if
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't track, right? And so you can't get any from like meaningful insights into like making future decisions if you don't have like historical data from the past, which is really something that is true across every field, like finance, like coding, everything. You want to track as much as possible so it makes it, you can get better insights to make your life and the lives of people depending on you better, right? So that's where time tracking is like, that's something that a lot of people fail to do because it's not as intense, it's not as time intensive, but it's definitely not something people would think about. Right, it's like, should I really track all the hours I'm spending on something in particular? It's like, yeah, you kind of need to because if you want to see, okay, well, it's like I don't, one of the complaints I hear is like when I'm coaching people for getting jobs, they're like, I don't have time to learn lead code and stuff like that. And it's like, really? Do you really not have time to learn lead code? It's like, what when you go back, it's like, okay, they spend 2 hours, with between their classes doing nothing. And it's fine to do nothing. Like obviously you need to have like you need to take some breaks sometimes. But if you're doing nothing for the whole day and you say you don't have time, then you're probably lying to yourself. And the way to know whether you truly have time or not is to track that time. And that'll be like a good metric to know, some good insight to determine whether or not what you're saying is true, good source of truth. And that's why, I encourage, time tracking. I just do it currently. I do it with Excel. I mean, Google Sheets, I'd say. So I just type it in. It's like, over time, I've made it easier for myself. So as opposed to typing a lot of things in, I have some fields that I select and then just click here. Okay, this is business. This is what I'm doing. This is who I'm doing it with. And there's the time I'm spending. So it auto calculates the time between when I start and when I stop, and then just gives me that data. So, at the end of every month or every quarter, I just go back, take a look. It's like how much time I spend coding. It's like, was coding really important to me? Then I can verify that because obviously it would correlate positively if something is important to you with the time
Yeah.
you're spending on that particular thing. And I think that's basically like how time tracking works for me.
No, yeah, I agree. I think I was talking to a friend of mine. We went to college together, and he works in consulting, and we were making a joke about how like, because in the workplace, you're always looking at data and trying to find efficiencies and look at, okay, what can we do to make something better or, more productive, etc. And we just talked about how like if we like are able to get this data on our lives,
Yeah.
we'll be 100% more effective or efficient at doing and
Yeah.
it's true. I think like it's a crazy concept to think about yourself as like I guess a tool, machine, or whatever that you
Yeah.
need to track. But I think like it could definitely give you, to your point, like a great, insight into, how am I actually spending my time and do I actually, or, and sometimes maybe you actually don't have time and that's good feedback. But then how can you then make time or, what can you do to basically create time to pursue whatever you're looking for? So I think that's great. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't joking. If once it come out, please let us know.
Yeah, for
We're all
sure.
gonna try it out. But I want to talk about, sort of a last topic here, talking about personal finances and then tied it into, your $1 million goal. I'm not checking your pockets or anything, but software engineering is, a lucrative industry and they pay well, etc. But you also have other side businesses, like you alluded to, you do train people to um pass technical interviews, whether it's for internships or jobs, which by the way, guys, you should go to his channel for that as well. He's very great. And also you also have, YouTube, etc. How are you thinking about all this as well as your paycheck from Meta or like even stock compensation, etc.? Like just give a framework of, how all this gets towards your $1 million goal. And I know you said this changed since you came out with that video, but can you just give us a, current breakdown or just how you're thinking about it? Even if you don't have an answer, that's fine, but just roughly just give us how you're thinking about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, for sure. So obviously big tech is lucrative, but it's not as lucrative, I think it's one of those things where when taxes take out the stuff and you're living in California, you pay rent and then you pay other things. Like, yeah, everything is gone. It's like, if you were to save your way into $1 million, it's not gonna happen like in 3 years, right? And you then begin to have to kind of like think out the box, right? It's like, well, if my job is not going to get me to $1 million in 3 years. And honestly, if I do stay at my job for a couple more years, like maybe 7 years, I would like even before then, I would get to $1 million. Like I think in 5 to 7 years, I would get to $1 million just by doing my job well,
Yeah.
right? So it's not really about, it's about the money, but it's not really about the money. It's really about the challenge and making that money within a shorter time.
Yeah.
But outside of that, it's like, well, I need to be creative in my thinking. So I tried a couple things. I was like, I'm gonna build this different thing, this app for forex trading and stuff like that. It's like I could do that, but it's gonna take so much time to test and actually validate and make money out of that, that it might not be worth the investment. I did consider YouTube. So on YouTube, I have two channels. There's this channel where I talk about the $1 million goal. Now, I sort of like limited myself in a way that that channel is going to be monetized very soon, but I don't want to use the money from that channel to count towards $1 million because I'm talking about making $1 million. So it's like, like one of these things where you see like these online coaches, they tell you how to make money by selling your course and how to make courses,
And
right?
that's how they're making the
And that's
money.
how they're
Yeah.
making their money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, why are we all gonna start making courses? No. But I think it's like I
Yeah.
want people to understand that you could transform different things, and bring them into money. And I don't want everyone to go about. I mean, like people can start their own $1 million journeys, but I don't want the precedent to be that the only way you make $1 million is if you go online talking about $1 million, right? About making $1 million, right? That's not the kind of precedent I want to set. So I limited myself from not using that as a source of, income towards $1 million. I'm not counting that towards $1 million.
Mhm.
I do think like, to some degree it's going to indirectly benefit that. I'll see if I can find some math to discount that indirect benefit, towards $1 million if I do make it to that point, or when I do make it, hopefully, fingers crossed. But the other thing I'm looking at is I have this other YouTube channel, which is solely responsible for it's called Just Fang, and I'm building a
Mhm.
company out of that. And that is really a way to make the recruitment process easy for software engineers. So the way I like to think about Just Fang is that I would help people get tech jobs they actually enjoy, which I think is a big factor. I don't think I want people to be in jobs they don't enjoy. I think I'm at a point where I'm, like I said, I'm grateful that I'm at a place where my skills align to the job I'm doing and the job pays well. So I'm super
Mhm.
lucky and grateful for that. And I want people to enjoy that luck and, and experience that gratitude, right? So Just Fang is really dedicated towards that. Now that's like a business on its own, and that's that one I'm counting towards $1 million. So for now, I'm working on this documentary about the recruitment process, and that's gonna come out. I have like some coaching programs that I offer, not fully offer, but I just make it, available out there. It's not
Mhm.
something I've been marketing, I've not been marketing super hard. I'm gonna go super hard in marketing that in a few months. But right now it's mostly just building stuff in the back. And the other thing, obviously, I'm gonna count my savings from Meta as part of the $1 million. I'm gonna count the stock from Meta, as part
Right.
of making $1 million. So those are like really the two main things that I'm considering towards making $1 million. The YouTube bit and then the Just Fang, Just Fang as a business, is gonna have like different tentacles as an octopus. It's gonna have like YouTube brand, it's gonna have like newsletter and stuff like that, and then it's gonna have like
Uh,
coaching and stuff like that. I'm gonna expand that to have like more dedicated, more targeted podcasts with tech. I've been speaking with recruiters and stuff like that, and I think they give valuable insights. I'm gonna put that out there and just make sure people can get value. And I think the thing for me, even in making this $1 million, is that I want to do it in an honest way, and I want to do it by providing value to people. Like I could
yeah.
have been a scammer, I could have done scam, somewhere I could have defrauded some people just to make that
Yeah.
$1 million. But I want to do it in a very honest and, a non-nefarious way, just a way that people who might not be in the position to scam, or I don't want people to be in a position to scam, but like people would see that, okay, there's still hope by doing things in an honest way. And that's what I want to achieve with the $1 million goal as well. Yeah, but
Yeah.
generally that's the plan. The plan is really just focus on Just Fang, focus on Meta, and that would count towards $1 million. So it's just a huge
Yeah.
bet I'm taking. Yeah, and that's how we're gonna go with that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I hope, yes, people do not scam. Scammers are not good. Try to do it the honest way, even if it takes longer. But no, that's exciting. Definitely keep us updated. We'll be definitely uh happy to welcome you on the show again when, Just Fang officially launches or a few years after or
Yeah.
whatever, just to get an update. Definitely love that. But, just want to move away from, more serious topics. Let's talk on a more lighted note. So you're a fan of Manchester United, man. What is going on with your
Forever.
team? What
I
what is
mean,
going on with your team?
it's
And
crazy I
by
was
the way,
having this.
I actually have a bit of a personal interest in Manchester's now because the owner is Jim Ratcliffe, right?
Yeah.
And so I cover chemicals, and one of his
Oh,
companies,
yeah.
he put his equity in Manchester United or stake in Manchester United as one of like he put it in the company's sort of like organizational structure.
Oh,
And so now we sort of fear that we could potentially see dividends go
yeah.
away from the company
Yeah.
and financing Manchester United,
Manchester
which is
United.
not doing great. So it's like, Jim, what are you doing, man? And he's a
Yeah.
billionaire, by the way. So
Yeah, he's rich. I think, look, I could do like a whole history of Manchester United, but I think the problem with Manchester United has been the Glazers. So the Glazers are a family that
yeah,
at some point owned like 100% of United. And then
yeah,
a new owner came, I think at 25% of Manchester United. And that was like Jim Ratcliffe, and that was Ineos, or however you want to pronounce it. And now I think a lot of problems with Manchester United, and we're having this conversation at work because I was super pissed. It's like, I don't think, I mean, Manchester United currently still has one of probably, if not the largest fan base in the world for any football team. I think
Yep.
probably either tied with Real Madrid or second to Real Madrid. You see a United fan everywhere you go. And we're
Yep.
proud fans, we're not hiding our fan. I know some people hide it, but like I'm a proud Manchester United fan. It just kind of sucks, bro. Like it really sucks. Like,
Yeah.
I watch the game, every time I'm going to watch the game, I'm like, Micah, don't do this. You know you're gonna come out tortured. Don't do this. And I still turn on Peacock and I watch the EPL games for Manchester and I'm like, I knew this was gonna happen. And it did happen. There are times when they pull like some surprises, but it's just like you just expect Manchester United to lose at this point in time in any game. It's gonna be a miracle if they win. Yeah, it just kind of sucks, but we're in it for the long run, forever. We're
We're in
forever
there for the long.
United fans.
You chose wrong as a kid and just never,
Yeah, you just have to stick to
wavered,
it.
huh?
I mean, like a lot of people from Liverpool and City, especially Manchester City,
Yeah,
they're just like recent fans. They've
I
never really
agree.
shown commitment to the team. It's just recently because they're winning a lot and people want to show
Okay.
commitment to the team. Yeah, but we're gonna
Yeah.
play City on April 6th. That's tomorrow
Yeah.
on Sunday, and
Yeah.
we're gonna destroy them as we've always done.
Are you sure about that?
We'll see.
I, I
We've
I
always
don't think you
destroyed.
even sound confident saying that, if I'm being honest. But
Yeah.
but we'll see how that goes. But interestingly, Manchester United is actually publicly traded as well.
Yeah.
If you go to the financials, you can see like they actually give very detailed information about like fan base and how
Mm.
much like fans they have across the world.
Yeah.
They also give you information about like how much to generate money. So, piece of it comes from, the EPL just being in the EPL, and then,
Yeah.
you have advertisement, you have ticket sales, you have food,
Yeah.
etc. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
it's
we're
very
also building
interesting,
a
very
$2 billion stadium. Hopefully it'll be done
stadium.
like the 5 to 10 years, I
With
think.
what money? With what money is the question. What
Yeah,
money are
so
you guys?
that's it. We're building the new stadium. It's gonna be the biggest stadium ever in the world. Yeah, much saying. This is why I'm proud of my team.
See, guys, this is what we call delusional fans right here.
It's not
Delusional.
delusional. It's just a
This
matter of
this
time. Everyone has their down moments. Yeah, it's just a matter of time. They just need to
so
be committed.
that's what the Roman Empire said, and
No, this is the
they no
Manchester
longer
United Empire.
exist.
We're never, we're just having, it's just a little rough weather. We're just,
Okay.
a little turbulence. We're gonna get through.
All right, man. Sure. For your sake, I hope you're right. But I'm also a Chelsea fan, so I say that with a little bit of grain of salt. I really don't care if you guys are successful, but we'll see how it all plays out. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, so getting to the tail end here, just want to sort of leave off with advice, right? The way I want to do the show is to, at the end, leave or have the guests give some sort of advice to, listeners, and in your case, it could be, students who are looking for a tech job or just people in life in general, or people looking to switch to tech. Just what would you say from an advice standpoint to offer our listeners and viewers, who are thinking about tech, how to go about it, what to expect, and, just overall
Wow.
your thoughts on it.
That's interesting. There's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Actually my brother was, texting me some time, about, what, he wants to get into tech. I mean, like he's also doing computer science in college. And, telling me about something. I was like, I think the best way to really get good at coding, software engineering, I should say, the best way to really get good is actually to build something from scratch. And I know it's not something people like to hear because like tech recruiting is a different ball game altogether. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not about how much you've built or what you've built or something like that that's going to get you there. But on the job, I think being able to identify different things, that are not necessarily only about coding is really important. So when I say coding, it's really about just putting in the code, on the IDE. There's so many things you have to think about outside of that you might not get that experience when you start out your career. And the more senior you go, that's when you get that experience. But the more senior you go, the more you're expected to know that before you get there, right? And the way to get there, I'd say, is to build something on your own, from scratch and make it public. That's why I've done something like that before, but I've never built an app before in my life. So I'm like, hey, let me just build an app from scratch and learn all the skills I need to learn for that. And I think, just building stuff on your free time, it's really, I spend about 2 to 3 hours a day or just about 2 hours, sometimes 1 hour, building this app. So in total, it's just going to take let's say I'm tracking my time for that, but it's gonna take. I'm sure I'm just gonna invest like a total of maybe 120 hours for building this app, and that's really not a lot of time. If you have like more free time than I do, if you spend that time doing, building an app or building something from scratch, you're gonna learn a lot, and it's going to take, overall between time periods, it's going to take less. You're not going to take like 2 months to do it. You're probably going to take like a couple of weeks to do that. You can fish 120 hours like within like 3 weeks or so and get it done. Right. And that's because I'm doing it more complex, not a super complex, but it's, there's a lot of things that go into it. Right.
Yeah.
But these are things that say, like, if you want to, I don't like the phrase break into tech. I think if you want to level up your skills, I'd say build something from scratch. Many
Yeah.
companies don't give you, many big tech companies won't give you the opportunity to build from scratch. And very, very welcome, like, very happy they don't, because it means they've built nothing. And, there are so many things you have to think about that will slow down your progress. But working at Meta,
Right.
for instance, it's easier to get some stuff done because other engineers from the past have laid down the foundation to make it easier for you. Now, when you have to lay down the foundation yourself, you get to learn a lot. And I think that's really critical for breaking into tech. Yeah. So that's just for someone, I don't use breaking into tech, but someone who really wants to level up their skills. You just need to build something outside of work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's great advice. I think even for me, like in finance and just giving my input here, I obviously have a finance job already, but I still go back every year or so, or every now and then just to like go back and look at Excel functions. I actually read over books that I like learned about how to think about credit investing,
Yeah.
and really just hone in on those skills to make sure that like you're actually like understand the fundamentals. So, obviously before we can build, from scratch just because that would require actually I think I actually have done that. So in the past when I was looking for a job, what I did was, just take a company and do investment thesis on it. So just
Wow.
research the company. And it's not a company that I was actually covering, just random companies in different industries and just try to understand what's going on in the company. Would I invest in this company? Do I feel comfortable? So that includes modeling out the company financials, researching, looking at ratings, reports, looking at industry data, all these things. And that's how I got to where I am. So I think I agree with that 100%. Definitely, definitely, definitely take time to build out something because you're going to learn some of the more nitty-gritty things that you probably want if you just part of like a big institution, like,
Yeah.
big tech. So I agree. But yeah, on that note, thank you for
Yeah.
coming to the
Thanks for
show,
having me, man.
Micah. I really appreciate the conversation. I think, our viewers will learn a lot. And, we definitely want to, like I said earlier, a few years down the line, if you want to come back, we're definitely happy to have you. And guys, please, make sure to go check out his YouTube channel. I'll make sure to put the link in the description. If you're interested in tech, he does one-on-one coaching. So definitely make sure to get in contact with him as well. I'm sure you will be able to get guaranteed success. I'm sure he has, I don't know, probably like a 99% hit rate at this point. So, you should definitely, definitely, definitely look to get in contact with him. But
Yeah. Appreciate it,
thank you
man. Yeah.
guys.
Thanks for having
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
All right, man. Appreciate it.